a lot of it comes back to temperance movement stuff, the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s in the US, and to a lesser degree, Great Britain, but some of those thoughts came from Great Britain. And essentially that evolved with the Millerites, and then ultimately, well, the most influential group going forward has been the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And people say, who are the Seventh-day Adventist Church? But they are the second biggest educator in the world after the Catholic Church. They're not great in numbers, probably only 20 million of them in the world, but they control education to an unbelievable amount, particularly in developing nations. Multiple hospitals around the world, multiple learning institutions. We've even brought out the term called the Blue Zones, which is people who Blue Zones longevity centers. They only became marketable in the US because they introduced Loma Linda University or Loma Linda Community into it. But effectively, the Adventist Church now own the Blue Zones label to market the plant-based diets, which is complete BS, because in fact all of those communities that are Blue Zones outside of Loma Linda eat significant amounts of animal-based food. But they have culture and they have community and they have family support. So I think that all those things are important in longevity. But effectively, in 1910, the Flexner Report came out as a product of work between Carnegie and Rockefeller, and we saw the closure of 50 universities, medical schools in the US and Canada, and they pretty well started moving away from holistic health towards the concepts of medicate and operate. And so and then they formed the pharmaceutical industry as a result of that sort of flowing on. So our medical education has been tarnished by the pharmaceutical industry and the corporates since 1910, the Flexner Report. Our nutritional education has been tarnished since 1917, October 23, approximately. I don't know if it was morning or afternoon, but essentially on that day was the formation of the American Dietetics Association to go forward with nutritional education. The important thing about that was that the woman who started that at the beginning of that was a woman by the name of Lena Cooper. Lena Cooper was the first dietitian for the US Defense Forces. She wrote the textbooks for dietetics for the next 30 or 40 years. She was a protege and working with a fellow by the name of John Harvey Kellogg of the Kellogg's cereal industry. John Harvey Kellogg was Seventh-day Adventist. He had worked for the first family of Lena Cooper, and at the age of 12 was typesetting her journals and her books with a printing press, setting out the type. And the critical thing about it is that at the age of Ellen G. White, who was the prophetess of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, felt very strongly about what could and couldn't take you to heaven. And the vilest sin that you could possibly do was to masturbate. It was like putting a gun to your chest. And so her very first book, I think, was called along the lines of a Solemn Word to Mothers. And it was about the perils of masturbation. Now, you've got to imagine that John Harvey Kellogg was a 12-year-old who was typesetting this. And he was completely brainwashed into believing that if you masturbated, you would in fact go to hell. He was a highly intelligent man. He developed the modern medical system, hospital system that we see. The Battle Creek Sanitarium that was set up by the Seventh-day Adventist Church became the model of where all institutions, big hospitals in the rest of the world are forever. And where you put multiple stories there, multiple specialties together, vertically integrate the whole healthcare system. Brilliant man. The problem that he had was that he actually felt this thing about masturbation was horrible. So he was right into circumcision, clitoral ablation, and quelling lustful thoughts by having a bland diet. And as a result of that, he and his brother William Keith invented Kellogg's cornflakes, which is a bland food which they could serve in the hospital. They also developed the first meat analogues, again, bland food which they could serve in the hospital to quell your lustful thoughts. Also believed in lots of water enemas. I think he himself used to have enemas twice a day, water, just to flush the evils out of the system. Now, this may seem detailed and a bit over the top, but when you actually realize that as a result of that, in the next 10 years, 101 cereal companies were formed around Battle Creek, Michigan, of which the vast majority of them were under the influence of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, became their business model that then expanded right across the world. Here in Australia, Ellen White personally came and set up Sanitarium Cereals here in Australia, or Sanitarial Health and Wellbeing Company, as it's now called. Universities, Avondale College, a hospital system, laboratories, and brought the printing press with this medical evangelism. When you go forward, you realize this influence, and we've got the textbooks from the 1920s written by the American Dietetics Association. They are plant-based. And you go forward, you find out that the textbooks for the next 100 years that are used for dietetics right around the world, particularly the Western world, and influenced everything from the food pyramid to the My Plate in the US and whatever things that are now going, have literally been plant-based propaganda, which originally started and continues to be pushed by the world, by Seventh-day Adventist Church, who were under the original influence of Ellen G. White, John Harvey Kellogg. Very, very influential people in dietary guideline committees around the world, World Health Organization, American Dietetics Guidelines Review Panels, are Seventh-day Adventists who still believe it. And again, I'm not making this stuff up. There's a journal called Religion. In 2019, there's an article talking about the global influence of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in dietary guidelines. They're very proud of the fact that they're completely manipulating it. And the argument they have, and in the references there, is Belinda's work. So Belinda's constantly still being approached in communication with current and ex-Seventh-day Adventists and their educators, and they're not denying any of it. They sometimes want her to clarify something, but effectively, they are very proud of the fact that they're trying to get meat out of the agenda. They're trying to keep it going through the plant-based aspect. They own the cereal industry of the world directly or indirectly. They own 14 different food industries, not just companies. They're pushing this propaganda of plant-based through our educational systems, what's served in schools, what's educated at schools, what's served in hospitals, what's served in the defence forces, the nursing homes, the prisons. And it's all based around this false ideology of a plant-based diet, which is based on religious grounds. The important thing from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, however, is that when the world turns toward, doesn't have to all adopt it, then Christ will return and will save 144,000 of them. It's just fascinating. Again, people, it's just what keeps coming about. And they're actually not even hiding it. I often say, where's the best spot to hide something? In plain sight.